Hello, everybody. It's me, Sports Talk Guy. And if you noticed, I'm wearing a Carolina Tar Heel sweatshirt, and they're my favorite college basketball team. Haven't talked about college basketball much yet on this channel, but I promise you, as the conference tournaments start coming, and as soon as March Madness kicks up, there'll be a lot to talk about. But for now, we're here to talk about the Broncos, and specifically, what about the Broncos? And the question is, were the Broncos really as good as their 13-3 record showed? Well, they did break the record for most points scored in a single season by a single offense. Very impressive, but how impressive was it really? Let's think. The Broncos and the Eagles were definitely the two best offenses in the NFL this year. But were the Broncos really, even compared to other teams other than the Eagles, that good as they were offensively? The Broncos ended up being ranked first, but in the second half of the season, after Week 8, the Eagles ended up with the best offense of the second half of the season. They were number one in regards to that. Now, the Broncos scored in a period of 3 games. Week 1, they put 49 up on the Ravens. A few weeks later, they put 51 up on the Eagles, and then about 2 weeks after that, they put 52 up on the Cowboys. Those 3 games that don't happen or are significantly less scores, either those scores cut in half. Are you really that close to where you are on the offense? I mean, I get it. That game was a shootout. I think the final score was 52-50 with the Cowboys, and then they blew out the Eagles and the Ravens. And both those teams at the start of the season were very bad defensively. The Eagles got significantly better to a point to where they were about middle of the pack, and the Ravens got back to their about ranked 10th form. But towards the end of the season, their offense definitely slowed down a lot, and you could see that in the playoffs, and especially the Super Bowl, when they actually played a top defense, they got killed. And what I want to talk about here specifically for this right now is when the Eagles, when the Eagles played top defenses like the Cardinals and the Saints, even though they lost to the Saints, they put up good numbers. They put over 30 up on the Cardinals, and they only put 20 up on the Saints. They kept the game close in general. While the Broncos only put 8 up against the Seahawks, and the Cardinals aren't too far behind the Seahawks, neither are the Saints. And, they faced the Chiefs, but the Chiefs' defense fell off, and when they played good offenses, that showed how bad the Chiefs' defense really was. And the Broncos, in my opinion, really didn't have a tough schedule. They didn't play any tough defensive teams. I mean, if you think about it, the toughest team they did face was the Chiefs twice, and they won pretty handily, but that's where the cracks started to show, and they lost to the Chargers, and the Chargers aren't a very good defensive team, and they also lost to the Colts, another bad defensive team, and then the Seahawks, the Super Bowl, proved why they were that bad, and now you're probably thinking, but they had the best number 1 overall offense, yada yada. They had Peyton Manning, he was great. Their trio of receivers was amazing. That's great and all, but what they lacked on offense was, I guess really you could say, poise. Towards the end of the season, everyone's stats went down in the second half of the season. I mean, Peyton Manning had a hot start. I mean, that's first 7 weeks. Those are tremendous. I mean, he still ended up breaking records, which is good for him. Nothing against Peyton Manning and nothing against the Broncos. I'm just saying they weren't, in my opinion, as good as they showed. Now, what happened was their poise. That's what I'm saying. Their poise, and I guess their lack of their run game and their offensive line was kind of weak. And now you're probably saying, but Knowshon Moreno had 20-plus touchdowns. Yeah, that's great. And when Peyton Manning gets you inside the 5 for about 17 of those touchdowns, I could also probably get about 15 touchdowns inside the 5. And Knowshon Moreno doesn't impress me. And then, you had the great receiving core, and Julius Thomas broke out, and the pass game was so good, but I still don't think they were the best offense. I think personally, and you might think this is biased, I don't care, the Eagles had the better offense. They had the best running back in the NFL last year, and I don't think McCoy's the best running back in the NFL currently, but he played like the best. I think Adrian Peterson's better, but that's another topic. LaShawn McCoy was the best running back. You had Nick Foles, who threw 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and had the second best passer rating in league history. Then you had Deshaun Jackson, who racked up yards and touchdowns. Riley Cooper also racked up yards and touchdowns. They didn't have Jeremy Maclin this year. Imagine if they had Jeremy Maclin. That'd be a trio of receivers that would kill. That'd be easily the best 3 receivers in the NFL. And on the defensive side of the ball, well, even the Eagles were better than the Broncos on the defense. I mean, the Broncos' defense was awful. The Eagles were bad, but the Broncos were awful. I mean, at least we had Kerry Williams, and we had Fletcher Cox, and we had Trent Cole and Connor Barwin and D'Amico Ryans. I mean, Von Miller gets hurt, and then he gets suspended, or other way around, vice versa. And then Elvis Dumerville did okay, and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie also played a very better year than he did with the Eagles, but that's only 3 guys, and one of them didn't even play. And I guess you're like, oh, there's Champ Bailey. Champ Bailey didn't have that good of a year. I get he's an old veteran, and he's always going to be one of the best corners to ever play the game, but he's not good anymore. And to be honest, I said before the playoffs started, like right after the last week, I said, whoever wins the NFC is going to win the Super Bowl because the AFC didn't look that intimidating. And I'm a guy that lives by, even though, another topic for another day, I love the Eagles' offense, but offense wins games, defense wins championships, as clearly seen with the Seahawks. Defense won them a championship. And if it wasn't the Seahawks that was winning, it would have been the 49ers. I guarantee you the 49ers would have also did just about as much damage as the Seahawks would have did. As the Saints, as the Panthers. Even the Eagles would have beat them the second time around. In my opinion, 5 of the 6 teams on the NFC side of the playoffs could have beat every team on the AFC side. Every team except for the Packers, that is, because the Packers they fall in the category. Because all those AFC teams were really, other than the Chiefs, they were all offensively strong, and all their defenses sucked. And the Chiefs had the best. When the Chiefs have the best defense on the AFC side of the ball going into the playoffs, that's how you know the AFC wasn't that good this year. And I mean, just think about it. All those teams that went all those 8-8 teams, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Jets, the Dolphins, and there might have been one more team thrown in there that was 8-8. There might have been 5 teams. They were all bad 8-8s, very bad 8-8s. And the only reason they went 8-8 is because they got to face each other. The AFC was very weak this year, and I expect nothing to change this year. The NFC is going to keep getting stronger, along with the Eagles, who are now reborn. You have the Saints and the Panthers in the South. Then you have all 4 teams in the West this year could do as much damage as each other can. If Sam Bradford stays healthy, if the Cardinals' defense plays well, and maybe they get some offensive help, and maybe in terms of running back, and Carson Palmer plays a little bit better, they're great. And then the Seahawks and the 49ers, you don't need to change anything. They're almost perfect teams. I mean, if you really wanted to argue, you could say quarterbacks, but basically. But what I'm getting at here is the Broncos weren't as good as they really showed. And the Broncos are definitely going to be worse this year for the fact that they're not going to have cap space to sign anybody, and they're also losing Eric Decker, who I'll save for another video. But I guess I'll say this right here. I think he'll go to the Patriots, but that's for another time. So that's all I really want to talk about this episode, why I feel like the Broncos weren't as good as they were, or as they felt. They gave the vibe. It was like a smokescreen. They weren't as good as they really were. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.